Sometimes what changes our lives is not a big event, but a silent moment, an image, a gesture, a person. What if I told you that one of the richest and most powerful men in São Paulo had his life transformed by opening a simple door and seeing something that no amount of money could buy? This moving story will make you rethink what really matters. It's about a cleaning lady who is invisible to the world, a single mother struggling to survive with a baby in her arms, and a millionaire who learned in the most unexpected way the value of empathy. There's no fantasy, no fairy tale, just truth, pain, and a real transformation, the kind that we never forget. Get ready to experience an inspiring story of new beginnings, unexpected help, and true presence. Because when such different worlds collide, the impossible can happen. And sometimes, even the most armored heart can surrender to what really matters. It was supposed to be just another rainy night. Gustavo Vilela, the kind of man who closes contracts before breakfast and closes billion-dollar partnerships without changing his tone of voice, returned to the company in the middle of the night. Something was bothering him. Maybe it was his restless mind, or maybe it was the deafening silence of his glass and steel penthouse. As he walked through the dark corridors of Vilela Tech, everything seemed in place, until he opened the door to the cleaning room. There, between two makeshift chairs, was a woman, fast asleep, with a baby wrapped in a faded blanket in her arms. A scene that could go unnoticed by anyone else, but not by him, not that day. That image paralyzed the CEO. It was as if the world paused for a second just for him to understand. There in front of him was more truth than in all his spreadsheets combined. And without knowing it, that moment would change the course of his own story. Gustavo tried to go on with his routine as if nothing had happened, but something inside him had already broken, or perhaps opened up. For the first time in years, he couldn't delve into the reports or pretend to be interested in the quarter's goals. The image of that exhausted cleaning lady with the baby in her arms kept coming back to him like an echo, and it destabilized him in a way that not even he, with all his rationality, could explain. It was as if, in that brief moment, he had seen something that had always been there, but which he had chosen to ignore. Real life, the raw and invisible struggle of those who carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, but keep going anyway. And it was precisely he, the man in control, the man in goals, the clean silence of meeting rooms, who found himself touched by a moving story that could not be written down in spreadsheets. What he felt was not pity. It was the beginning of something rarer, empathy. Driven by a restlessness he couldn't name, Gustavo asked his assistant to find out who the cleaning lady was. Within minutes, she had a name in hand: Luciana Ribeiro, 31, a single mother of a baby named Isabella. He lived in the back of a lady's house in a forgotten part of the city. There was no one to help her, and yet she had never received a single warning. A silent worker, invisible, impeccable. He began to observe her, not with superiority but with genuine interest. He saw her steps through the cameras, her careful movements, the way she arranged her daughter before picking up the heavy work. That moved him, because there was a strength in Luciana that Gustavo had never seen up close. A real strength that came from necessity, from the courage of someone who takes care of a child and still manages an exhausting shift. The inspiring story of a single mother who, without knowing it, was changing the outlook of a man accustomed to not feeling. The next night, Gustavo did something he would never have done before. He left a bag on the locker room sink. Diapers, new bottles, wet wipes, and an anonymous note. It was a simple gesture, almost shy, from someone who was slowly learning to leave his own bubble. For him, it wasn't charity. It was the beginning of a new beginning, a real effort to say, without words, "I saw you." Luciana found the bag with wide eyes. Between shock and fear, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: being noticed. Suspicious, yes, because those who live on the margins learn to doubt before trusting, but deeply grateful. That unexpected help didn't solve her life, but it warmed up a part of her that was already too hardened. And there, discreetly, an unlikely connection was born between a cleaning lady and a millionaire, made up of small gestures, but with a huge impact. The inevitable encounter happened when Luciana, tired after yet another day at work, was surprised by Gustavo in the locker room. He didn't come in with a bossy attitude or ask any invasive questions. He just said, "Good evening," and that coming from him was already unusual. Luciana, cornered, answered in a whisper. She was nervous, afraid that she was about to be fired for having taken her daughter to work, yet again. But what came next disarmed any defense. "Does she come with you often?" he asked in an almost human tone. Luciana swallowed hard. She explained that she had no one to leave her daughter with, but that she was doing her job properly. She didn't need pity, just a chance to continue. Gustavo listened, without judgment, without rushing, and it was there, in that cold and cramped corridor, that an invisible bridge began to be built between two worlds that had never touched, until now. In the conversation that followed, Gustavo did something he had never done with an employee before. He shared his story. He said that he grew up alone, raised by an alcoholic grandfather, and that he had to fend for himself from an early age. Luciana, surprised, listened in silence. For the first time, she saw not only a powerful businessman, but a man with scars that the corporate world did not allow to show. Wounds different from hers, but still real. And it was on this common ground of pain that they began to understand each other. Luciana did not romanticize anything. She firmly stated that she did not want to be seen as a burden. She did not need a savior, only respect. Gustavo, in turn, admitted, "You made me see how blind I was." Empathy sprouted from the hard ground of truth, and there, between mops and sincere looks, a moving story of transformation was born, the kind that touches even the most hardened hearts. On that difficult Tuesday, São Paulo seemed to be conspiring against those who were already struggling too much. Isabella woke up with a fever, her eyes burning and her body limp. Luciana, in a panic, picked up her daughter, gathered medicine and baby bottles, and even though she was shaking with fear, went to work. She had no other option. The new supervisor might have been understanding, but the rules were clear. Reduced shifts, a new department, and no mistakes would be tolerated. The rain fell hard. Trees were on the ground, traffic was at a standstill, and buildings were without power. Almost everyone at the company had already left. When Gustavo saw Luciana wandering the hallways with her daughter in her arms, in despair, he dropped everything. He ran downstairs and found her sitting on the cold floor of the reception area, shivering. Without thinking, he picked Isabella up in his arms and said, "Let's go now." That night, his home became a shelter, and care became a bridge. A CEO and a single mother, united by what really matters, true presence. In Gustavo's house, the silence was new, not the silence of meetings, but the silence of delicacy. While he prepared a cold compress, Luciana changed her daughter on the couch. The sophisticated mansion transformed for a few hours into an improvised home. Hot soup, a cup of tea, a pediatrician on the phone. None of this was planned, but everything there was sincere. For the first time in a long time, Luciana could simply rest. What happened that night was not a soap opera romance. It was caring. It was listening. It was the kind of love that is born in a gesture and grows in silence. Gustavo, accustomed to contracts and figures, discovered that there was something more powerful than profit, welcoming. And Luciana, accustomed to being strong out of obligation, finally allowed herself to be fragile, a moving story built on presence, improvisation, and a rare kind of humanity that, when it appears, transforms everything around it. The following days brought discreet but profound changes. Gustavo quietly revived an old company project, a support space for mothers with small children. No spotlights, no speeches, a crib, an armchair, a microwave. Was it not enough? Maybe. But for someone living on the margins, that gesture was everything. For the first time, the company where Luciana worked recognized her reality. not as a problem, but as part of the solution. And Luciana, without really understanding what was happening, was transferred to a new department with lighter hours. No one said the name of the person who suggested it, but she knew, not because of her ego, but because of the intuition of someone who always had to guess what was coming next. There, in silent recognition, her soul began to blossom. She was still the same woman, the same single mother with a baby at work, but now there was solid ground under her feet and hope in her eyes. What was born there was not a movie romance. It was something rarer, a construction. Gustavo and Luciana began to share small moments, a coffee at the end of the workday, an exchange of glances in the hallways. There were no declarations, only gestures. He, who had been rigid before, now walked more slowly through the hallways. The CEO of numbers learned to listen, and she, who had always struggled in silence, began to feel that she was no longer alone. Their relationship was based on true presence. Isabella, with her spontaneous giggles, became the link between two worlds that were once distant. Gustavo reorganized his nights to be with both of them. He learned about diapers, colic, and breastfeeding. Luciana, in turn, was not fooled, but she could no longer resist affection. It was a moving story about transformation, not through words, but through coexistence. And that, in the end, was all they needed. 3 months later, Luciana was called to HR. The news? A promotion. Gustavo wasn't the one who decided it, but he knew. Teammates had sent her a letter praising her dedication, her discreet way of collaborating and inspiring. She left the room with an envelope in her hands and a lump in her throat, not for the position, but for the recognition that for so long seemed unattainable. That night, she found Gustavo preparing lasagna in the kitchen. "Guess what?" she said with a shy smile. He didn't wait. "Did you get promoted?" She laughed. He replied, "I would have done that a long time ago, but it's good to know that the world has started to see you the way I see you." That wasn't an empty compliment. It was the validation of a woman who, even without asking for anything, deserved everything. And once again, life proved that touching stories are not written in a hurry. Months later, the setting was different, but the essence remained the same. In the sunny backyard of Gustavo's house, Isabella played with little pots on the floor. Luciana rested with her feet on a pillow, and he read in silence. From time to time, he looked away from the book just to admire the two of them. It was simple, and precisely for that reason, so powerful. The moving story of that cleaning lady in The Millionaire was not made of promises. It was made of presence. "Do you want to know what I like most about this place?" she asked. "That I don't have to ask permission to be happy." Gustavo smiled, and Isabella, without understanding anything, laughed too, as if sealing a sacred moment. There was no castle, no fairy tale ending, but there was something much rarer, a real new beginning, built with care, empathy, and choices made with the heart. And in the end, that was all it took to transform the impossible into a home. What about you? Have you ever stopped to think about how many incredible stories cross your path every day, but go unnoticed just because they seem too simple? The story of this single mother and this millionaire is more than a tale of overcoming obstacles. It is a powerful reminder that transformation happens when we choose to truly see others. When we stop judging, we start to embrace them. And sometimes all someone needs to not give up is to be seen. Now tell me, which part of this story touched you the most? Leave your comment below. I read them all with love. If you believe that stories like this deserve to be spread, share this video with someone special. It is clear. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the next heart-touching stories.